Hey guys, this is Andrew, and we're going to get started here in about 5 minutes. We just want to make sure, if you could do us a favor, that you can see my screen. One of them is me saying hi to you, and the second screen is the one basically which is my computer, where I have Ms. Brie's picture, building critical mass. Just want to make sure if you can see it and you can hear us loud and clear. Hello. Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's what we just needed so that we could, we know that everybody can hear us. Thank you. Okay, so the only thing I need to just hit is record in 5 minutes. So
You're good for me then?
but I did mute the mic. See, now the Miss Brie, how are you? Can you hear me?
Make sure not everyone's on mute.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see. So for some reason, Miss Brie is not connected to audio. Huh? Oh, okay. Can you text her and ask her?
You can type her a question right there.
Yeah, but she may not know that, right? Huh?
Hi, Andrew.
Oh, hey, Miss Brie, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Can you hear me clearly?
I can.
Okay, great. And you can see yourself in the background, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. All right, awesome.
Hey, Lori. Oh. No, we continue.
Hey guys, welcome to the webinar. This is Andrew Holmes from Chicago RIA. We have Miss Brie Schmidt from, I forget the name of your company.
Oh, Second City Real Estate.
Second
I
City.
meant city. I'm like, Chicago?
No, I meant Second City because I was going to say Midwest Summit, but
That
from
too.
Second City. And it's an interesting time, right? We obviously had Miss Brie coming to Chicago RIA, but we had to reschedule. And it's a time for a little bit of pause. Everybody hopefully is healthy and get over this period, next 2-3 weeks of the coronavirus. So we thought maybe we find a new medium to get things out because there's nothing except you deal with it and you move on with life. So Ms. Brie, welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great, good to
This
have
is
you.
actually better for me because I hate putting pants on, and
Right.
now I can sit here and drink my wine. So we're good.
Right. No, this is great. Wonderful. So I guess we'll start with, we were obviously going to have you come up and kind of talk a little bit about, this whole idea of building wealth, building critical mass. And it's kind of times like this is when you started. There was a financial crisis, when you started investing. But before we get into it, I wanted to ask you, you guys had the Midwest Summit coming up. You guys still kind of trying to deciding as to what dates or anything, or we want to talk about that today?
Sure, it's a good question. Last night the CDC announced that their recommendation is that no gatherings of more than 50 people for the next 8 weeks.
Okay.
I know the state of Kansas has mandated that. Our event is in 9 weeks. So
Okay.
I don't know at this point. I think it's too early to tell what's going to happen. We have a decision date of April 15th before
Right.
we have to decide if we're moving forward or not.
Okay.
So all tickets to the event are refundable up to 7 days prior to the event. In the chance that we cancel the event, all tickets are refundable as well. We extended our early bird pricing to April 15th. And that's kind of when we're planning on making a decision. I'm
Right.
quite confident that things will be in a much happier, less stressed
Sure.
environment in 9 weeks.
Right.
But it'll be very interesting if the lockdown, this social gathering, social distancing, ends after 8 weeks and is successful. Our event will be coming up right after that. And I know a lot of the presenters that I've talked to so far about it, will have to pretty much rewrite their entire presentation because the market, the market in 9 weeks is going to be probably a lot different given the last few weeks than when they started writing their presentations a few months ago.
Correct. No, that makes perfect sense. So let's kind of go back to, the idea of how did you come into the market? What time? Because that time frame becomes very, very relevant, right? Because at this
Absolutely.
point, you probably can see the writing on the wall that probably some things in real estate will reset, which we needed a reset anyways, right? So kind of, you want to start with your background a little bit so people get familiar with where you started investing from?
Sure, absolutely. So I started investing in 2011 in the Chicago market. I did a house hack, which if you don't know what that means, it's when you use typically low money down financing to buy a small apartment building. If you're under 4 units, you can still use residential financing. Once you get to 5 units and above, you need commercial financing. So we did an FHA, 3.5% down, bought a 3 flat in the Chicago area, lived in 1 unit, rented out the others. And it was quite easy. My personal preference is to buy properties that are already rehabbed. That way I'm using the least amount of capital down and able to then leverage that capital for multiple properties. But we were living for free, so we had no mortgage payments. We started saving up what we were spending on rent previously in addition to our incomes. And about 9 months after, 11 months after we bought our first property, my father passed away, and he had a very aggressive form of cancer. It was like a 9-month, he was fine, and then all of a sudden he was not fine. And I've talked about this before, but he passed away the day before he retired. And what was supposed to be his retirement party ended up being his wake. And it really messed with me afterwards, because I kept thinking about, I kept hearing in my head all the times he was like, oh, when I retire, I'm going to go do this. And when I retire, I'm going to go do that. And never got to have those things. So worked out a plan, what we were going to do and how we could be financially independent. And it came back to real estate. So we bought another property about 14, 16 months maybe after the first.
Before we move forward with Brie, what area of town did you end up buying? And you said another curious thing, 2 points. You said that you don't like to buy properties where you do a lot of rehab. You like to buy properties where either light rehab or the rehab is already done. So can you explain that a little bit? Because a lot of people may not understand what you're talking about.
Sure. So think about it this way. If I'm buying a property, so it depends on the financing, right? If you're not going to be living there, if you're buying it as an investment, it's between 20 and 25% down. So every $20,000 of cash is $100,000 of house. Does that make sense?
Right.
So for example, I always tell a story of I was looking at a property in Milwaukee. It was a duplex. I think I was buying it for $30,000 and it rented for $1,250 or something like that. Sounds like a great deal, right? Who wouldn't buy a property for 30 grand that rents for $1,250? Well, it needed about $20,000 of work. And that work was basement foundation stuff. So it wasn't even stuff that would increase my rents. And I declined the offer and decided to go buy a different property, because that $20,000 to me is $100,000 of house I couldn't buy. So I could buy 2 $50,000 duplexes that were already rented or already rehabbed, rented at market rents. And instead of spending, whatever, 25 grand on one. Yeah. So that's part of my reasoning. I mean, I've done rehabs, but part of that has to come into when you talk about your goals, people, you've got to start with the goal and work backwards. And the key proponent to figuring out how you can make that goal achievable comes really down to the financing. And
so a lot of times people think, right, that, oh my God, I'm a woman, I can't do this, right? Oh, I don't understand construction, I can't do it, right? I mean, we all have these excuses, different excuses, but what you just said, which was critical, which is that it's really understanding real estate, understanding financing, how those pieces come together, rather than, we're not in the construction business, we're the investing business. Would that be an appropriate statement?
Absolutely. It's like a chess game, really, and you've got to think 10 steps ahead.
Right.
So another example would be when it comes to financing. So I had 3 properties in the Chicago area. Our third property, we did a major renovation to. We pulled the cash out of it, and then we were looking to expand our investment portfolio, and we were looking at the Milwaukee market, which was way cheaper than Chicago. And I knew that we would have an aggressive growth strategy. I knew that with the capital that we had on hand and the price points in Milwaukee, that we would grow quite quickly. Well, conventional loans, you can have 10 loans.
Right.
So I knew that we already had 3. I knew that we'd be buying more than 7. And
Right.
once you get to 5, 4 is your cap, but once you get to 5 conventional loans, you cannot do a cash out refinance on any property that you do not personally occupy. Well, I knew that we bought 2011 to 2013 in Chicago. I
Right.
knew that the prices were going to go up, and I didn't want to shoot myself in the foot down the road, not being able to pull that capital out. And I
Right.
pulled $300,000-$400,000 out of those properties. So I ended up doing commercial financing on everything in Milwaukee, which then freed up my ability to do cash out refinances. Now, if you don't know that, right, and then you keep buying properties thinking like, oh, well, once they appreciate, I'm going to pull the cash out. Well, now what are you going to do? Now
Right.
you've got 10 properties and now you can't touch the cash. So now
So
you're stuck.
it's interesting because what you're doing is you start and you're like, hey, this is my goal. And for a lot of people, what they do is they first buy and then they think about it. And then they realize, oh my God, I put myself in a corner that I can't get out of, right? You did the right strategy, which is, hey, can I think through this whole thing? How is this going to work, right? You first got the map out, figured out the road. I can't take this highway, but so I have to take a detour rather than get on the road and get somewhere and oh my God, now I'm stuck, right?
Absolutely.
And I can't get to my goal.
And a lot of it, and like honestly, a lot of it comes down to financing. I tell people all the time, if you're, if you don't know what you want or where you're going to go, that's fine. But the first thing you should really learn is financing, because that's going to determine what you can do, how you can do it, and when you can do it.
Right. No, it's interesting because to me, as we're going through this sort of a whole coronavirus thing and everything, and people are like, oh my God, what happens? What happens? I'm like, listen, man, at the end of the day, in terms of hopefully, things blow over a period of time, clearly it will take a toll on the market. Clearly, they're going to dump a lot of money into the market, right? And over time, people are going to lose properties. The people who are not well positioned, some people will get hurt. And then yet there are going to be other people who are going to come out on the other side smelling like roses, right? And in fact, better off than they were before. And that's going to be a game of finance.
It is.
Right.
It really comes down to credibility. So when you're in the residential space, again, that's under 10 loans, single family homes up to 4-unit properties, your ability to borrow money is based on your credit, your income, and what they call a DTI calculation, which is your debt to income calculation.
Right.
Once you get into the commercial space, which can be like, I've got 2-unit properties with commercial loans. So you can get commercial loans on smaller asset classes, but 5 units and above is considered commercial, or mixed use properties are considered commercial. That comes down to your track record. And I can tell you right now, given this current climate, right, if I default on my commercial loans, that is going to stick with me for the next 10 years of my career.
Correct.
Because it's going to always go back to the track record.
Correct. So in terms of for you, right, when you bought your first property and then obviously sometimes something tragic happens, we know we should be doing something, we know we should be thinking differently, yet that shakes us, right? For you, it was, your father passing away, and that was a kind of a, big moment where you're like, okay, this is one of those moments where I have to do something. At that time, was there a thought process? How did you kind of figure this process out as you were going through? Were you thinking through this process? How was it that you were like, okay, I can refinance this many properties?
I wasn't, in the beginning, I wasn't thinking through a lot of things. So understand, it wasn't until I owned 3 investment properties that I ever went to a RIA or read a book about investing or even spoke to another real estate investor. I had no idea that there was this whole world of real estate investors where I could learn. So luckily, I got my education just through going to networking events like yours. Bigger Pockets is a great resource as well, listening to podcasts. So before I went from 3 properties, I ended up buying another 18 properties in 9 months. That period of time in between was my learning period. But the financing pace was I've been licensed as an agent since 2004. I was working for a real estate agent since 2001. and I helped my friend start a mortgage business in 2003. So I just had an understanding of the mortgage business. So when I
Right.
started investing in 2011, I already had some sort of background of it and knew how important it was to understand these things. So I just started asking a lot of questions. The
Okay.
things that I didn't know, I just asked questions. And, then I just started learning about all the different, we'll call them roadblocks potentially with financing. And it's still some things that on Bigger Pockets, I would say a third of my comments to this day are about financing because people don't understand. Another big thing people do is like, hey, I'm going to buy this property in cash and fix it up and
Yeah.
then refinance.
Right.
Well, two things. A, there's a 6-month seasoning period before they can go off before they can actually pull your cash out. So if you're doing a 3-week rehab and you're expecting to pull out your cash in a month, that's not going to happen with conventional financing.
Correct.
Secondly, make sure that you're able to get that financing because I've
Right.
seen it too many times where they're like, hey, I dumped every single penny I have in this property. I went to go pull my cash out and found out because I've only been self-employed for a year, they can't use my income to qualify me for a loan. And now my DTI ratios are off and now I've got to wait another year before I can have my 2 years on my tax returns before I can, those are all things you should know. And they've got hard money lenders or they're, whatever. It happens all the time. So understanding these things before you do anything is critically important. You have to think through your exit plan as well. It works for flipping and holding.
Right. So the question becomes is this, right? Like a lot of times when you started investing, initially you started with a multi-unit, like a small multi-unit where you were living and then the other units were paying for you guys to live there. And then you start scaling. What is it that has stopped you? Because you speak at a lot of places, you do the Midwest RIA, you're able to kind of look at the whole marketplace. You know a lot of people that are in the big multifamily space, right? And I've laughed about it a lot of times. I'm like, I didn't even know you, right? Yet the basic philosophy of investing, is so similar that I think you should be scared in the short term and optimistic in the long term, meaning you think through what you do before you do it, because something like what we're going through may happen, and you should always be safe. And you've always played this cards very, very closely. Where does that philosophy come from of not going for bigger deals, and then why not?
That's a good question, actually. So John Kasman, my partner at the summit, and I were just talking last week before this whole coronavirus stuff hit about what we were going to talk about at the summit. And, John is a syndicator. I believe you're having him do a webinar now in the month or so. And I'm very anti. So that's what we decided was going to be our stage time, would be a debate with me and John about why he likes big and why I like small. But yeah, I've got plenty of reasons. The residential financing, even commercial financing on a smaller scale, is so favorable, right? One of the big problems with commercial financing is it's got a 5-year reset. So I just reset my properties this summer, and I've got a few more I've got to reset this year, which means that it's a 25-year amortization, which means that the loan is the payments are spread out over 25 years. But after 5 years, the whole balance of the last 20 years is due. So you have to either refinance or sell. So you are going to be subject to the current market, right? So even when my bank underwrites it, when I did my first loan, it was at 5%. When my bank underwrites my loan, they do it at 6.5%, figuring that a few years are going to be at 5, a few years are going to be at 6, a few years are going to be at 7, and probably even 8. So that's going to, like 6.5 would be the average over that 25-year period. So if something happened in the opposite direction today and our interest rates jumped up to 10%, what am I going to do? I probably can't sell it. So that's one reason why I don't like commercial. But as far as the asset classes, I mean, I think we brought this up last year when I came to speak, but because it was last April, right before I came out to speak at your event, or it was the previous year, I had hired an economist. I was at another networking at another summit event in Philadelphia. I hired an economist to review my portfolio, and because he had talked all these big words that I did not understand, and so he walked me through my portfolio, all these different calculations, IRR, what all this stuff was, and said to me, I would sell off anything that you do not want to hold in a recession. That's where
Right.
we're at right now. And that was April of 2018. I sat on it for about a year and still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And then last year, I was really concerned with some things going on in the market. So I sold 6 properties last year. I just sold 4 in the last 2 weeks, and I've got 3 more closing this month.
Okay.
So sort of perfect timing, but the reason why I could split my assets up. So
Right.
I could look at my properties, and that's what I did. I went through a deep dive of my portfolio and said, hey, last year I sold off the 6 that, just were not performing.
Yeah.
And then this year I sold off the ones that, while they were profitable, for one reason or another, I just didn't want to keep it, whether that be they were either very up or very down, or I wasn't in love with the area. But it gives you the ability to kind of pick and choose and magnify or identify, which ones are performing, and then get rid of the dead weight and keep the good ones.
Right. So would you say that smaller properties, a lot easier for people to get started with, number one?
Absolutely.
Number two, a lot more nimble, right, in terms of what you can do with that. There's a lot of times I think, it's exciting. You go look at some of these multi-units, 200-300, units, and you have a pool, you have a cool, golf cart. It looks cool. But I have personally, this is just my opinion, and I may be totally wrong, but I tend to believe that just being cool doesn't make you money. I've always felt simplicity and basic things. Be cool with, when you have a lot of money, be as cool as you want. But coolness comes at a price, right? I would rather be boring, because boring to me is very, very lucrative. I just have to have a very basic philosophy of doing things, and I like boring. So it seems like you tend to kind of agree with that basic philosophy. Would that be correct?
I mean, you're talking to a girl who puts on pants maybe 5 hours a week and drives less than 4,000 miles a year.
Right.
So,
Okay. Got it.
queen of boring over here.
All right. Okay, good.
But yes, I agree. I mean, so I think so my job as a real estate agent, I work with a lot of clients, especially new investors that are looking to get started. And I always say, like, half my job is as a therapist, because half my job is talking them down of like, oh my God, I could, I just had this call the other day with someone. We could expand the master bathroom, because it would be cool. We can do this skylight. I'm like, sweet, that's 25 grand.
Yeah.
And it will get you $25 more a month in rent, not really worth it. Or like, especially with Airbnb, short-term rentals, right? Short-term rentals are getting killed right now, myself included. But short-term rentals are illegal in the city of Chicago unless it's a condo building with more than 6 units that doesn't have rental restrictions, or
Right.
a property that you personally occupied that unit. So if you buy a 3 flat in Chicago, you live in 1 unit, you cannot Airbnb out the other unit. Now, Chicago has not been enforcing that, but then don't go running your numbers based on, hey, I'm gonna get this
Based on
Airbnb revenue, and that's how the deal works. When the reality is, hey, if they start enforcing it, you've got to bring it back to a regular rental, and then what are you gonna do? So there's a lot of different moving pieces within this whole world of real estate investing. Keep it simple, keep it simple, keep it easy. No one, needs to be going out and doing crazy things just to be cool. Who cares? Like, who cares
Right.
if you're cool? I'm not cool. You're not cool.
No, listen, I mean, I have a very old school belief system, which is that I would rather be, I truly believe that over time, you buy a lot of properties, you start paying them off, and you have a lot of properties that you own for cash. I mean, I'm very old school, but my point is that having 10 properties that are paid off, and then have as many properties refied as you want, take out as much, but 10, 12, 15 properties over time, 6, 7 years, I think you should pay it off, because then you have peace of mind, right? You have good amount of cash flow coming in, 10, 12,000 coming in every month. And then you don't have to worry about the ups and downs of the market. I have a very simple philosophy that if I don't understand something very well, I just choose not to invest in it. To me,
I'm 100% with
anything
that.
complicated.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I'm 100% with that. 100%.
It's just that if anything requires too much intelligence to understand, I don't want to do it, right? Because simple things make a lot of money, and they're very, very profitable. I mean, cash on cash returns on what you're doing, on what we do by simple properties, even in Chicago still, we've been getting 25, 30% cash on cash returns. On top of that, 30, 35% equity, right? And it's going to be interesting because, so what do you think in terms of, now, obviously this is pure speculation, but where do you think it puts a lot of investors who over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we have seen this, that have been buying like as if it's like drunken sailors. I mean, they're like, oh my God, the property makes a little bit of money, I'm going to buy it. They're buying a lot of Airbnbs, they're doing all kinds of things. And they're like, Andrew, what is wrong with you? I'm like, listen, man, I tend to be very scared of things I don't understand. What do you think happens to them when something like this happens? There's an 8-week holiday, let's say. Do you think that some of them will get in trouble? Or do you think most people have those?
Absolutely. I mean, so Chicago is the city of Chicago has shut down all eviction court proceedings till April 15th. The city of Milwaukee, where I also invest, is closed till April 30th.
Right.
So I have a tenant who my PM's fault. They should have been more on top of this, but they have not paid rent since November. We got to court. They have a continuance. We had court today and boom, it got canceled. And guess what? Now I'm not getting rent on that unit for another 6 weeks easily until I can get them out. And then I've got to turn it over. So now we're talking 6 months of lost rent because of this situation we're in. I don't know what to call it,
Right. No, nobody knows.
So if that was my only property, I'd be screwed because how would I pay that mortgage out of my pocket? I don't think the banks are going to be giving us, a furlong on mortgage payments.
Sure.
We'll see. Italy did it, so I don't know. But that being said, if that was my only property, I'd be in hot water. If I didn't have reserves, I would be in hot water. And if that wasn't a good purchase, right? Where if that was half my mortgage, or if the tenant's rent was paying half my mortgage, then I could be in foreclosure. So we'll see what happens. I personally feel that the situation we're in currently with the chaos and the panic has a lot to do with the fact that we don't know exactly what's going on with this virus. The reality is, at least from what I've researched, 90% of patients don't even need to go to the hospital. And the patients that do end up, I think there's a 6% currently death rate of closed cases. So cases that have the result, 6% are closed. They are very, very heavily skewed to the elderly. So I think in the next 2 weeks, once we start hearing from people who have come from the other side of this, and once we're able to stop the spread with our social, social distancing, I think things will calm down drastically. But the repercussions of the stock market have already set the dominoes into effect that will be so much far reaching than that. And that is not surprising to me. So I've always said the 3 things that I do not want to do is invest in the stock market. I do not want to invest in syndication, and I do not want to invest in self-storage. Those
100%.
are 3 areas
100%
that I
agree.
will not touch. And so I've always said, I do not think that this recession will be the same as before. I do not think that we will see, a drastic collapse of the housing market like we did before. I do think that people's incomes will drastically be affected by the stock market, right? So that will trickle into real estate. I do think multifamily and self-storage, people are buying at, they're buying at 0% interest rates. That's very common in the commercial world. So they're doing these 100% financing or 80-20 loans, interest-free or interest only, because that's how they got the cash flow to work. They couldn't get the cash flow to work with a principal and interest payment. They could only get it to work with an interest payment. So, and now they're not going to be able to exit. And when they do exit, the cap rates aren't going to be the same. So that's where I see, if there's a real estate collapse, I see it being in multifamily.
The multifamily, obviously nobody knows with these, but I truly, truly believe that. And the other part of it is also, if you have A, affluent market, B, bread and butter market, and then C, market with some challenges, your tenants who are in the multifamily properties, I think it's going to be hard because they're the first people to get laid off, or they're the first people to get furloughed. People who are professionals, they're going to ride through it. Nobody likes, obviously, being in this situation, but they're going to ride through it. And yet people who are economically on that sector, and I think that will trickle down to a lot of the syndicators, a lot of the other people who are in the marketplace, where cash flow, equity positions have all gone out the window because, oh my God, it's so good, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, even
that,
my properties in Milwaukee would be a C-class asset, and I had talked to my
Right.
property manager today. You know, we're expecting to have a lot of problems with rent collection.
right,
That's just what it's going to be.
right,
So today we spent time going over like, hey, here's some resources.
Right.
You know, and anyone on this call, there's 90 of you. I highly recommend, if you have the means, to donate to your local food pantries, because even with the schools closing, I mean, I'm a new mom. My baby turned 7 months this week. So I spend a lot of my time social media on mom groups because I'm new to all
Sure.
this.
Sure.
And the amount of parents when the schools closed who their children rely on having their breakfast and lunch paid for by the school are
Yeah.
now, you know, I can't afford $65 in groceries and I don't know about my job next week.
Right.
So food pantries, a lot of local food pantries are providing the school meals for the children while they're out. And then I know my local food pantry tomorrow is giving out boxes that are a week's worth of groceries. So I've been trying, you know, spreading the word about raising money for food pantries because that's really going to be a big impact on a lot of these people. And if you spend any time on social media, you see, you know, something like this triggers such a catastrophic impact for most of my tenants. So how can we help them, right? We're obviously going to be lenient. We'll obviously work on payment plans, but you know, we have to get through this together because my bank isn't going to let me not make my mortgage payment.
Right. No, it's just, see, it's interesting that, you know, for some people that are landlords, you have to be in a position to help, right? For some people, I just think that the buying activity has been so heavy in the last 2-3 years. And even with Chicago RIA, with Mastery, we've said, hey guys, listen, temper yourself. You're like, you gotta think through what you're doing. Just because it's good, you can't go nuts, right? Because any hiccup in the economy, suddenly all this work that you've put in, it comes at a lot of jeopardy, right? So it's great to hear that. And yet on the other side of it, I think it'll create a tremendous amount of opportunity for that smart and savvy investor.
Absolutely. I mean, I've said it before. My biggest problem in life is having too much money. Because when I have too much cash, I feel the need to spend it. I remember being, you know, when I was in the middle of, you know, growing my portfolio, I was up in Milwaukee a lot. So I'd get a hotel and stay up there for a few days and look at properties. And I would, you know, have my spreadsheets and like that. And like, I woke up in the middle of the night once. I was like, okay, like I think I maybe saw like 15 properties one day. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna make offers on these 3. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night once being like, why am I buying these? Are these even a good deal? And having to like, I remember getting up at like 3 a.m. and pulling out my computer and like running numbers and be like, okay, what's my criteria, right?
Yeah.
I can't be, just because I have the money to buy things doesn't mean I should be buying things. What's my criteria? And really broke that down to like, hey, I want these numbers and I will just buy properties that meet these numbers. And ended up not buying any of those properties that day. But then had to kind of shift my thought process. Like, hey, you know, maybe it will take me longer, because I think one of the problems people have is they always have these goals of like, hey, I want to buy 10 properties next year. That shouldn't be your goal.
No.
Your goal should be, I want to get X amount of cash flow.
Correct.
Or I want to invest my money and get X amount of cash on cash return. If that's one property that meets that criteria, great. If that's 6, if that's 12, whatever that is, but that's my criteria. So I want to get, you said 33% cash on cash?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Even, you know, 20% cash on cash would be a great number. And then,
you know, I think what you just said is so critical, because we see that. I mean, even within the Mastery Group, we see that people are like, oh my God, she got this many, that's why I have to have 10, right? And it's not about that. It's not about, you know, it's about, to me, if you have 4 properties, but they're great quality properties with good quality cash flow, that's better than having 20 properties, right? It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. That's what is more important. So,
but that's today's social media burdens, right? Is we're always comparing each other. Right? I don't care what you have, Andrew. You've got planes and Rolls Royces and stuff. I don't care about those things. Like that doesn't mean that you're more successful or better than me.
No,
Nor does
absolutely.
what I have mean that I'm more successful or better than anyone else in this group. You know, we got to stop comparing ourselves to people because that starts making you not make smart decisions. You know, when you just want the excess of things, whether that be excess properties or whatever, and it just doesn't make any sense. If you know, like there's certain things you want a plane. I believe that was a big goal of yours.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to work less than 30 hours a week.
Okay.
20 hours preferably. You know, that was my goal.
Mhm.
You know, and I had to put money into my business and spend extra money to do those things. Everyone's got their goal,
Goals,
but it shouldn't be about what you have or I have or anyone else has or how many we have. It shouldn't matter.
But I think what happens is that takes a level of maturity, right? It takes a level of understanding, and hopefully, as you get older, the more the more I invest, the more I realize that whatever the other day somebody told me about this great deal, multi-unit deal. They're like, Andrew, you're missing out on life if you don't do it. I'm like, listen, man, I'd rather miss out on life. I understand very basic things. I understand how to buy simple houses and pay them off. And I tend to stick to that. And if I miss out on an extra 10 million, God bless. At least I understand what I'm doing and I feel comfortable with that risk. That's just, and I've realized the more basics I keep it, the easier it is for me to manage.
Absolutely. So again, one of my big things too is like what keeps you up at night, right? If you're up at night worried about how you're going to pay for something or, like that should not be what you're doing. I sleep like a baby, right? My business is automated. It's simple. It doesn't keep me worried. If we have, said for some reason in my business with our properties, furnaces always break at the same time, and I'll have like 5 new furnaces in a month and then I'm good for the year. But if you're not like, if that worries you, how you're going to pay for that sort of thing, that's a concern. So keep it simple, keep it easy, sleep like a baby, makes life a lot more enjoyable.
Makes sense. So what do you say to people like, today we're still kind of early on in this period, right? Next 2 weeks are going to be the time period. So what do you say to that person? Oh my God, I'm stocking up on all the toilet paper and all the, there's that person on one side and there's the other person on the other side who's just, totally cavalier, right? But to that person who's thinking about it, they're like, well, how do I look at this crisis, right? How do I look at something like this in a reasonable fashion? What do you say to that person?
I think it's too early to tell, to be honest. I think it's too early to tell how this will impact the real estate world as well. If you're hoarding toilet paper, right, don't be a dick, share it. Like, that's ridiculous. I know my food pantry is in desperate need of toilet paper. I had to actually go pick up toilet paper from my insurance broker who has 5 children and couldn't find toilet paper. So when I was out, I saw 1 roll and got it for him. And he came and picked it up yesterday because how else was he gonna like handle 5 kids at home on quarantine with no toilet paper, which is ridiculous. And I'm glad there's the price gouging people have been starting to be investigated, which is great because the hand sanitizer guy that had like 17,000 bottles in his house in Tennessee, I mean, it's just absurd. But it's too early. Again, we were poised for a recession.
Absolutely, 100%.
People have been talking about it for years. I can't believe it's a flu that's taking us down, to be honest. But I mean, only time will tell. Things are not going to be as easy as they were. It's simple as that. The stock market is volatile at best. People have lost a very large portion of their wealth, and that is going to affect how much they go out to eat, right? Which is going to affect the restaurant business, which is going to affect how often you get your hair done or your nails done. I mean, it will trickle down like it did before, and we will be in a different situation a year from now than we were 6 months ago.
Right. But I think clearly, I mean, I've always been the believer, even in 2008, 9, I was a believer that people who can hold on, right? People who basically hunker down and have made good quality investments I truly believe over time, now the time is it a year, 2 years, 3 years? We don't know. But over time, you're going to end up in a very good position if you have done the right things, right?
Okay.
And if you have not, then it's going to be a tough time. It's just a fact of life.
I mean, the real estate market always has cycles.
Right.
You know, the
100%.
last 60 years, there's been a curve of up and down cycles. This is now we're going to go into our down cycle. It was
Right.
time for it. This was, I think, this was the longest
Upcycle ever.
upcycle we've ever had. So it was
Yeah.
just a matter of time. But you're right. Like, I'm not worried. I'm not thinking of going to go sell a bunch of my properties. You know, I'm going to hold them out through the next downturn, and then, you know, probably keep them and see what happens in 5-10 years.
Right.
That's just the reality of it. But yeah, I mean, if you were smart enough to get into real estate investing, you were smart enough to know that there will always be up or down cycles.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. So I think this has been a fun thing. You were one of our first guests. We just did a webinar yesterday. I'm glad you participated. Would love to have you on because it's kind of, these are easier to do for us, and you can have a glass of wine. I see you're having a glass of wine as you talk, because it's going to be a progressing thing, and the different areas, right? Different markets in the city will react differently to it. Some of the A markets that are within the city may take a bigger hit, or some of the other markets that were so-called up-and-coming markets, right? That people are always super excited about. They may take a different type of hits. People who are in the middle of a flip, that is going to be something interesting to see how those turn out, right? So I couldn't be at least happier to kind of get this off and running, because we need to be cautious yet hopefully optimistic about the future. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we should be super concerned yet. Again, I think a lot of us are, horrible analogy, but I heard it once and it stuck with me ever since, that real estate investors are kind of like that beaten dog. You know, so you get a dog from a shelter who's been abused, and even if you've had them for 10 years, you still lift their hand and that dog cowers in the corner.
Yeah.
That's how we are as real estate investors because of what happened before. You know, we're always assuming that the hit's going to be the same. I really don't think it will be. I really don't think that what happened before will happen again. I think people will have lost jobs. We will be in a down economy. But that doesn't mean that we can't have renters. Doesn't mean that people can't, pay their bills. Some more than others, but there's not going to be a mass amount of foreclosures, I think, like there was before, based on predatory lending and, false pretenses, we'll say. So again, I don't think people should be, super concerned that this is going to be the same thing it was before, is my point.
No, I think some of the inventory will get cleaned out, which it needs to be. For a healthy market, it needs to be. So I'm not super concerned. I just think that people who have made poor decisions, it is what it is, but to the most extent. And it's a very sick thought, but I'm going to make it anyways, that we're all, entire world is in it together, right? It's not just one state. It's not a certain type of person. Everybody, it's the virus. It basically levels the playing field, right? In terms of what happens, and the economic impact is going to be across the world. And if we live in the United States, this economy has to be basically has to come up for the rest of the world, because it affects the rest of the world. So that's, I guess, the silver lining.
Yesterday you saw what the Fed did. They're starting to put money, it will be interesting, but they are, making decisions a lot quicker than before. We're seeing a lot of preventative measures put into the economy currently.
A lot of proactiveness.
Agreed. A lot of very strong, decisions. You know,
And
they
th-
didn't
this is-
they didn't just, like, oh, here's a cookie. They were like,
Yeah.
here's the cookie shop. Let's make this work.
Yeah. No, I think it is too early to say it, but I'm going to say it that they will overcorrect this market. It will overcorrect it. And at some point, it's going to create, again, a bubble on the back end. Now, it may take 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years, but I truly think that everybody is so dependent on each other, on the consumption that we have as Americans. They will overcorrect the market, because till now, as far as I was concerned, the real estate market was too overheated. I don't
Yeah.
care what anybody says, it has been ridiculously high.
Mhm.
And we may not have seen that in Chicago, but around the country, none of it makes any sense. And
No, I
California,
think
the
that,
East Coast,
at least in Chicago where I deal with, it's been, we had one of our worst years last year.
Yeah.
Not because we don't have clients, we have triple the amount of
Yeah.
clients than we've had every other year. It's that I've got nothing to show them.
correct.
Because ethically and morally, in my own head, I'm not going to show them a property I don't think is going to cash flow.
Right.
So, and it just happened with them. That's how it's been for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, where it's been almost impossible to find properties just because the numbers don't work. And
No.
that's just the
And
reality
see,
of
to me, it had to happen. Nobody knew it would be a virus, right?
Yeah.
But it had to happen, because it always does. That's always been the the way investing works. So, having said that, Ms. Brie, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
on.
Yeah.
I'm glad this is the first time we had a speaker. I have a glass of wine. Next time we're going to do wine and cheese. RIA
I
meetings.
don't know
It'll be
why
fun.
you don't do that. It's great.
Yeah, no, we're going to do that. It'll be fun to
Yeah.
do it. To everybody, to you, have a
Hopefully y'all are
safe.
having lots of wine too.
Yeah, I know. Safe a couple of weeks. Take care of
Yeah.
yourself, and
You too.
keep your wits about you. And thank you so much again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.